Tonight, the staggering human cost in Turkey and Syria after devastating earthquakes. Collapsed buildings and desperate searches signal tragedy on a horrifying scale. As tiny moments of relief puncture the tension, worried Canadians wait for word. From a region crying out for urgent global help. On the eve of a healthcare proposal to the provinces, we hear what's needed from the front lines.
Abject pain trumps ideology every day of the week.
This is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
A race against time and temperature is underway in Turkey and Syria tonight. It's been more than 24 hours since the first of several earthquakes and aftershocks brought down thousands of buildings. The search for survivors is only getting more desperate. Some clearly are being found, but moments like those are swamped by others just full of grief. Entire apartment buildings reduced to rubble in an instant. The count of the dead is still rising. It's now over 4,000. The number of injured higher still. Briar Stewart has arrived in Turkey tonight. She shows us why it will be a long time before all those still unaccounted for can be located, and the complete level of the human cost truly known.
You can hear the power of that initial tremor. A magnitude 7.8 earthquake centered near the border between Turkey and Syria. It hit as people were sleeping, totally vulnerable. Then came the aftershocks, and hours later, a second major jolt. As building after building collapsed, people ran for their lives. In Malatya, Turkey, this one came down as rescuers were searching a nearby pile of rubble. A reporter there capturing the panic and fear on the faces of those fleeing. In the city of Diyarbakir, rescuers looked on as another came down. Thousands of buildings have fallen in Turkey alone. This man says he was in one. His wife trapped under him and unresponsive. He got out. Now he waits, trying not to lose hope. Rescuing her and countless others, the urgent mission. The search is made so difficult by piles of cement and debris. Cranes help where they can, dogs too. It's tedious, careful, desperate work. Bodies are uncovered, so are survivors. Those brief moments of celebration, full of overwhelming relief. Searches like those are also happening across the border in Syria. Saw, hammers, bare hands, people doing what they can to move these mountains of debris. Here there's both government-held and opposition-held territory, already devastated by war and a refugee crisis. Now, new pain. This father is mourning his newborn killed in a collapse. Those who survived are being treated in overwhelmed hospitals. The opposition emergency organization, White Helmets, says aid is desperately needed.
Northwest Syria now, it's a disaster area. We need help from everyone to save our people.
Now, a day after that first quake, the scale of the destruction is becoming clear. Tens of thousands now homeless in both countries try and find warmth and safety where they can. The cold weather is making the conditions on the ground even more miserable for the rescue crews working through the night and for people seeking shelter. Many are staying at shopping centers and mosques, either because they don't have a home to go back to or they're too frightened to spend the night inside. The government has declared 7 days of national mourning in Turkey. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Istanbul.
The complete scale of loss and destruction can't be known yet, but what we know so far is sobering. The quake wasn't just powerful, it also affected a huge area. The epicenter was just northwest of Gaziantep in southern Turkey. At just one point along a 100-kilometer gash where the shaking was the most severe. A CBC News producer, Dalia Ashri, happens to be in Gaziantep right now, very close to the epicenter of that initial quake and to several aftershocks.
Oh, I'm just feeling an earthquake right now. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is bad.
So that was Dalia earlier in the day, just as she was setting up for an interview, a sign of how precarious and dangerous the situation still is. So Dalia joins us from Gaziantep. It's very early in the morning there. Dalia, can you give us a sense of the situation in the city right now?
Yeah, Adrian, it's quite a catastrophic situation right now in Gaziantep. Of course, many of the buildings have collapsed. When I took a walk outside earlier today, there was debris everywhere. Even the castles, parts of it has come down. People are starting to be put in shelters. So banquet halls are being made into shelters. Airport has been closed off for first aid. Of course, a lot of the sidewalks are also closed off. And there's not that many cars out on the road because it's dangerous to be driving outside right now.
I know it's really disorienting when things just aren't in the right place and people don't seem to know what to do. What's the sense you're getting from people you've spoken with?
Well, I work with a lot of Syrian journalists here, and of course, the situation right now for them is quite triggering, quite traumatic, as they have endured the civil war in Syria for over a decade. And so many of the Syrian diaspora that I've spoken with here, they're very shaken. Many people are sitting in their cars, just running their engine, trying to get the heat. Of course, that can only last for so long. And of course, as well, there's no water. So there's people out on the street trying to get water from the fountains. And like I said, people are seeking shelter in areas that are available, like I said, in the banquet halls, sports centers, and in the airports. But a lot of high emotions, and people are very frantic, too, to know about their loved ones and if they're okay, whether it's here in Turkey or in Syria.
Absolutely. There must be so much anxiety. Dalia, thank you very much. Look after yourself.
Thanks, Adrian.
So we call it an earthquake, but it was actually a pair of major earthquake events, followed so far by dozens of aftershocks. Altogether, Turkey's president is calling it a historic disaster.
Son bir asırda yaşadığımız
Recep Tayyip Erdogan called this Turkey's worst disaster since 1939. There have been 12 major earthquakes to strike the country over the past century, each killing 1,000 people or more. The region is effectively a geological time bomb. In this quake, it was two tectonic plates meeting almost right along the Turkish-Syrian border. The Arabian plate pushing north, grinding against, then catastrophically slipping against the Anatolian plate. There could be months of aftershocks as those plates settle. This part of Turkey, and especially Syria, is vulnerable. The quake hit an area controlled by a patchwork. The Syrian regime, 3 different militias, pro-Turkish, Islamist, and Kurdish, and Turkey itself. Both buildings and daily lives unsteady to begin with. And now this. Here at home, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada stands ready to assist.
Canada is looking at how we can help directly and immediately, but also how we can work with the international community to be there for people who are suffering right now in the immediate and for the long term.
Global Affairs says it hasn't received any requests for assistance. Almost 9,000 Canadians are registered as being in Turkey and Syria. So Canada is one of at least 45 countries to offer the assistance, but there are also individual Canadians who've leapt into action. They have close ties to the region through heritage, family, friends. Sarah Levitt on their response and their despair.
George Oswad's been a refugee in Quebec since 2016, but most of his family are still in Syria, plus his best friend.
It's like my brother, too. Like, I grew up with him.
With his phone buzzing constantly on Sunday night, Aswad got devastating news. That friend didn't make it.
All the building down. Like, they were on the top, everything destroyed. They took them as a piece. Pieces.
I'm in big shock. I am talking, but I can't believe this has happened to my family.
Nurul Sumbultepe's family in Iskenderun, Turkey, their home destroyed.
My brother-in-law was confirmed dead. And my eldest brother, sister-in-law, nephew, his wife, and 1-year-old baby are still under the rubble.
Right across the country, members of the Syrian and Turkish communities are experiencing heartache.
You didn't sleep very much last night.
Yes, correct. And it's only 1 hour.
Instead of sleeping, the president of Quebec's Turkish Association has been working the phones.
Any help will help, yes.
He's been trying to raise money and gather goods.
Right now is the basic needs. It's important because people left their houses and they can go back. Socks, winter jacket, winter boat.
Also necessary, expert emergency help.
We've offered our drone teams. We've also offered water purification technology.
In Toronto, charity Global Medic is also gathering supplies.
They need access to clean drinking water, they need access to food, they need shelter. So we've offered up our field hospital units.
We're roof poor, we can do nothing.
Aswad says he's feeling a bit useless.
We do as much as we can to keep support those people.
People like his friend's family, who he says he now considers his own. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
The tragedy of those earthquakes was marked in Toronto tonight. The CN Tower going dark for 5 minutes each hour, a recognition of the thousands killed and injured. Toronto's Mayor John Tory also expressing his deep sympathy. Now, dozens of countries and NGOs are mobilizing to help Turkey and Syria, even as people there are already running out of time. Katie Simpson shows us how the urgency of disaster is running up against the barriers of a divided world.
Urgently needed help is coming from all over the world. Highly trained Romanian rescue crews among the first to head into the disaster zone. In Italy, firefighters do a final check of their gear before deployment, while German search dog teams anxiously wait to board their flight. Of course, we are going with a feeling of uncertainty, this dog handler says. Hopefully, we will be there in time. At the United Nations, there was a moment of silence to honor those who could not be saved.
The United Nations is mobilizing to support the emergency response, and so let's work together in solidarity to assist all those hit by this disaster.
Getting assistance into Turkey, a NATO member, will be relatively straightforward. But support for Syria, 12 years into a civil war at the hands of the Bashar al-Assad regime, is far more complicated.
I really worry for the people in northern Syria. They have what international presence there is a very limited.
The only certain support is coming from Russia, which sent a few dozen rescue crews, despite Vladimir Putin helping the Assad regime carry out bombing attacks for years. Syria's other ally, Iran, reportedly sent a plane carrying aid.
When it comes to humanitarian needs, we have to and we must put politics aside. We need to reach these people with this humanitarian assistance.
The U.S. is committing to help the people of Syria with a plan to go around Bashar al-Assad, relying on trusted NGOs to deliver aid.
These partners who, unlike the Syrian regime, are there to help the people rather than brutalize them.
It is a plan other Western countries are expected to follow as the scope of the disaster comes into focus. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
Let's turn now to a major story set to play out in this country. Tomorrow, Justin Trudeau will lay out a 10-year healthcare funding plan for provinces and territories. The details are scarce, but the premiers are gathering, waiting to hear them. David Cochrane looks at what they're hoping for and what they're wary of.
The premiers arrive in Ottawa for a meeting 2 years in the making and use the lobby of a downtown hotel to lobby the Prime Minister.
We know what are our priorities. We know how to invest the money. We don't need the federal government to tell us how to invest the money.
We haven't seen any details yet. I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic.
What we're looking for is a federal partner that's there for us on the core healthcare system.
For the Prime Minister to want to come to the table, I think that is reason for optimism. So I think that's why you're probably seeing an optimistic tone from all the premiers.
That optimism will be met with cash.
We will be there putting more money on the table.
Sources tell CBC News the Prime Minister will propose a 10-year plan with billions of new dollars starting in the next budget, including a top-up for the planned increase in the Canada Health Transfer and extra funding for bilateral agreements to help provinces and territories deal with their specific needs.
This is going to be work that we're going to continue doing over the coming weeks.
I don't think any of us expect a deal to be made tomorrow. I think the Prime Minister himself has said that he doesn't expect that either.
No deal because at this point there is no hard information. The premiers won't see the federal plan until the meeting on Tuesday.
I would have liked to have seen the proposal ahead of time, there's no question.
The lack of clarity frustrating for some, the federal effort encouraging to others.
There's no obligation to negotiate, and that's been the posture of previous governments, but I think it's certainly a good sign, a good gesture of goodwill that the Prime Minister is open to having this meeting in the first place.
The meeting will be short, just 2 hours, for the Prime Minister to lay out a 10-year plan and try to win the support of all 13 premiers. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
The RCMP in British Columbia has confirmed to CBC News that an arrest warrant has been issued for actor Nathan Chasinghorse. He's been charged with 1 count of sexual assault. The Dancing with Wolves actor had a court appearance in Nevada Monday. He is accused of sexually assaulting Indigenous girls and women across multiple states for at least 2 decades. He's being held without bail. A CBC News investigation has found that many well-known retailers have been sharing your data with Facebook's parent company, Meta. This comes after federal privacy commissioners took Home Depot to task for doing just that. Thomas Daigle has the details.
From Best Buy to PetSmart, Bed Bath & Beyond to Lululemon, shoppers at some of Canada's biggest retailers had their personal details shared with Facebook, whether customers were told or not.
Damn, okay, that's pretty interesting. Did not know that.
It annoys me, but I'm not surprised.
The Federal Privacy Commissioner recently called out Home Depot for sending e-receipt information to Facebook owner Meta without getting consent from in-store shoppers.
Any organization that has a similar practice is in breach of privacy law in Canada and has to stop this practice.
CBC News reviewed data downloaded from the profiles of several Facebook users. The files showed purchase records from multiple prominent retailers.
We found at least, I think, 8 different stores.
We shared our findings with privacy expert Opiemi Akonbi at Toronto Metropolitan University.
It might feel invasive, but a lot of these companies just think that it's the price they have to pay to get a better sense of what people are doing.
Meta uses the data to tell retailers how online ads lead to in-store purchases. But lawyer Tony Merchant says there's more to it than that. He's launching a class action against Home Depot for its data sharing practices.
Facebook takes a bit of information, ties it into a big package that you would not want to be out there about you.
Hudson's Bay says for now it's stopped giving customer data to Meta. Most other retailers we uncovered, including beauty product store Sephora and fashion chain Anthropologie, wouldn't comment.
Meta declined to say how many chains in Canada share details about their customers. None of the businesses would tell us whether they warn shoppers their details may not be kept secret. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Tonight, we dig into a story about a Canadian export that's got animal rights groups raising the alarm.
If they're not going to take action in a situation like this, when are they going to enforce the law?
What CBC News has learned about a shipment of horses sent to Japan. And later, on the eve of tomorrow's meeting about the crisis in Canadian healthcare, some frontline stakeholders offer their solutions. Plus,
people die, right? Like, people are murdered because of domestic violence.
could electronic monitoring keep victims safer? We're back in 2. There are new calls for a ban on a long controversial Canadian export, live horses used for sushi meat in Japan. Karen Pauls shows us how animal welfare rules were broken recently without any repercussions.
79 horses were brought to the airport in semi-trucks, loaded into wooden crates 3 to 4 deep, then left on the tarmac to await a cargo plane and the long flight to Japan.
It's awful because they're flight animals. They're not used to being handled like that. It's a very stressful time for them.
Every year, Canada exports between 3,000 and 4,000 live horses to Japan, mostly Clydesdales and Percherons, bred specifically for human consumption as horse meat sushi. By law, the horses can only be in transport a maximum of 28 hours. But on that flight from Winnipeg to Japan in December, there was a delay taking off and a blizzard at a planned refueling stop. The exporter says a decision was made in conjunction with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to keep going, even though that limit was going to be exceeded.
We just found another airport that had the pilots and decided between everybody, let's get her done. Let's do it. We decided that for a couple hours, this was totally the best thing for the horses.
Animal welfare groups filed a legal complaint with the federal government. It acknowledged the shipment exceeded the legal time limit and that 3 horses had fallen in their crates, but said there would be no enforcement actions.
If they're not going to take action in a situation like this, when are they going to enforce the law?
Advocates are upset the Trudeau government still hasn't fulfilled a campaign promise. But in a statement, the minister said, "We are engaging with key stakeholders to determine the best course of action to ban the export of live horses for slaughter." An NDP petition, co-sponsored with Canadian musician Jan Arden, is expected to be presented to the House of Commons.
Our message to Canadians is that this is preventable and it's stoppable.
Raising horses for consumption is an industry worth tens of millions of dollars a year in Canada. Ottawa's challenge, balancing the livelihoods of those farmers with the well-being of the animals. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Canadians know all too well that healthcare in this country is in crisis, but what kinds of solutions are out there? We talked to some frontline stakeholders about what they'd like to see. And later,
we need to utilize the technology. The police want the technology. The women's shelters want the technology.
Using electronic monitors to protect victims of intimate partner violence. Could they save lives? The National takes you deeper into the stories shaping our world. Next. Well, tomorrow in Ottawa, the Prime Minister will sit down with the premiers to talk healthcare. They need solutions, and the people you're about to meet might have some. An ICU doctor from Ottawa, a nurse who left the public healthcare system because of burnout, a Winnipeg patient who opted to have surgery in Lithuania, and a caregiver. Let's get into it. So this is a moment to talk about healthcare. More money is being spent on healthcare than ever before. It's not enough. We're in a nursing school right now where enrollment is up. It's still not enough. If you had one thing that you wanted the politicians to understand about what has to happen in healthcare right now, what would it be, Sarah?
Well, Adrienne, I would say this. I need to have a visibility cloak. Caregivers need to be seen, they need to be heard, they need to be respected, and they need to be a vital part of the healthcare team included.
Lynn Tran, you're a nurse who left to go into the private system.
Adrienne, I think we really need to reinvest in our nursing and our healthcare professionals, bring back all those benefits of pay, patient care, collaboration with our healthcare teams. We need them at the table because they are key stakeholders, and we need the government to listen to what their needs and wants are.
Max Johnson, you are a patient who made a very difficult decision.
It's just very simple. Leaving tens of thousands of people in pain is not a very sound health policy. I think from our perspective, we need politicians to realize that the solution to these crises is going to be long-term and not necessarily beneficial in the next election.
Dr. Chermintang, you're an ICU doctor.
Honestly, I think we need to put more emphasis on prevention. We can predict areas that are going to be of higher needs over the next few years, and what would that look like if we started to put more resources into areas that are going to be concerned? Mental health, like this, the fact that mental health services, especially exiting the pandemic, the people are still paying out of pocket, to me baffles me. Like,
it's not free and fair distribution of services the way universal health care we think it is.
Yeah, and by definition, it's not. And from my perspective as an ICU doc, we see the repercussions of not having that access.
Armin, can you start off helping us understand, though, we talk about this as if this is Canada's problem, but it's not unique to this country.
It's absolutely not unique to this country, but we have a very strange profile in the advanced world in terms of how much we rely on the private sector to begin with. We don't cover pharmacare, which is very unusual. We don't cover the things that keep people out of hospital, like dental care, mental health care, all the rehab, and we don't pay attention to the people that are actually providing the care. And I couldn't agree more with Dr. Chermatin, which is to say we need to keep people out of the hospital. We're turning to the hospital because we don't have primary care. We're turning to hospitals because people don't have the care they need at home with people like Sarah. We need to get people out of the hospital into the community with good primary care.
So the conversation that we need solutions, here's a province, Ontario, that's offering it. We have problems with sort of hernia and cataracts. You know what? If you need them, you can go to this private clinic. You're still not out of pocket, and it will take you away from the public system. On paper, it seems like it might ease some of the pressure.
Well, they're not out of the public system. We're paying 30% more for those services because they happen to be for-profit clinics. We could be running more of these cataract factories in the public system, off-site of hospitals or even underutilized spaces in hospitals.
So how does it cost more money to make that happen? To do those cataract surgeries in private clinics?
Because this province in Ontario has offered for-profit clinics 30% more to incentivize them opening up. Talk about baffling.
It's interesting listening to the conversation because as a patient, we get very worried. You know, we hear all sorts of people talking about all sorts of problems, all sorts of solutions, but they don't seem to appear anywhere. And the principle of a funded universal healthcare program, I think, is one that almost everybody in the country would agree with. But let me tell you that abject pain trumps ideology every day of the week. I ended up going to Lithuania to have a knee replacement. And I did it because there was a 2-year waiting list in Winnipeg. It was painful to walk, painful to sit. I couldn't work. 6 weeks later, I'm back from Lithuania. 9 weeks later, I'm economically active again. I probably paid more in income taxes in the 2 years that I otherwise would have been sitting in a wheelchair.
I fully understand why, for an individual, the idea that there is a solution I can pay for is extremely attractive. The problem is they pay for this care with the people that are leaving the public system. The public system keeps getting worse. So the people that don't have the money are getting continually inferior care. And it's like so many things in the economy. What's good for the individual is suicide for the system. We know that there is no country in the world that has relied heavily on a for-profit system that delivers faster, better, cheaper care. So we need to make the public system work better.
As we're talking about, you know, different clinics and private clinics, they're not just buildings, they're staffed with people. They're staffed with people like Lynn because you left the public system.
Absolutely.
That is a huge loss.
Yeah.
I'm thinking you're not that long out of a nursing school just like this one. You know, trained here, went to school here, started in the public system.
Absolutely. Like, this all looks so familiar. It's like it was yesterday that I was back in school. It was a tough decision. And don't get me wrong, I love being a nurse. I just don't think it was the career that I expected it to be. And I absolutely agree with this discussion. Like, I'm a prime example. Like, I feel as though there were lacking opportunities for training and growth, and we need to leverage everyone's expertise and knowledge within the healthcare system and have them operating at their highest capacity.
That's one of the main solutions, is leveraging like personal support workers. You could train personal support workers within a year, and they have abilities to put in Foley catheters, to put in IVs, to do ECGs, offload a lot of the work that our nurses are having to tackle. Yeah. And why aren't we leveraging that?
What would make you go back?
It's hard to say, Adrian. I think we really need to reinvigorate what it means to be a nurse. And I think that's something that I lost passion for.
And do you feel that now in the private system?
I do. I think there are things that I really value in a career, and I value that flexibility, that work-life balance, and actually being compensated for the work that I'm doing.
That doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask.
It's completely reasonable, and it is insane that we have undervalued the work of people like Lynn in the public system by holding their wages in a province like Ontario at a 1% increase in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a massive labor shortage, preventing these people from taking vacations when they're burnt out, and then wondering why do we need to turn to staffing agencies and pay 30, 40, 50% more. But you can have a for-profit system for the people that can afford to pay if it's on top of a functional public system. We already have that. Executives don't go to public hospitals unless they're really sick. And if they're really sick, where do they go? They go to Emerge. They go and get care in an ICU, which is publicly funded. And we are letting the public system decline. And you need to support these doctors and these nurses with nursing assistants, medical scribes, all the things that these people that have got the most public training to do their job properly. We're not doing any of it.
And honestly, I'll speak personally. I could see way more patients if it wasn't for some of the paperwork. I can see way.
You need a medical scribe.
We did a show on that actually. I love the idea of a medical scribe.
And add the caregiver in that circle.
100%.
Because we are of equal value. We're treated like we're an inconvenience. I come to say, oh my God, my husband's, he's having a seizure, I think, and they're like, unless it's a doctor who sees it or a nurse who sees it, it's like it didn't happen.
And your story is a double whammy of a story because you left the public system as a social worker to become a caregiver.
It was unbearable. I couldn't do it. I'm very lucky. I have 3 hours of care right now, and I do the rest.
And is the 3 hours care public, or do you have to pay for that yourself?
I do not have to pay for it. There are supports that I would love to have, and I actually would even pay for some of them because I'm so desperate to have them, but they don't even exist.
So this is a great example of where investment in prevention could have so much impact. I can think of several examples of things happening at home where you're going to need the support that can't be offered at home, and now you get into Emerge, and if you're admitted, you're in the emergency room for 2 or 3 days potentially. This is where it falls apart. I don't think people fully comprehend what kind of level of cost we're talking about.
I look at what are fundamentally and apparently astonishing amounts of money spent on the administration. I look at the 4 Atlantic provinces, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and the 3 territories. We maintain 9 health authorities for under 5 million people. 1 out of every 500,000 people is a health minister. It's absolutely astonishing. There seems to be virtually no collaboration, no cooperation between various health ministries.
The amount of inefficiencies in the healthcare system is out of control.
Is it because of the staffing issues?
Don't get me started. So patients coming from a different jurisdiction that we don't have access to their chart or their diagnostic imaging. We don't have that CT, let's just order another one. You want to provide the most efficient, most reliable care to a patient. You want to have that data in front of you.
Not only that, we don't even do some of the most basic system design issues like standardized waiting lists, right? So you've got actually a clearinghouse of where the surgeries are, where the backlogs are, that you as a patient can choose to travel a little bit further and get that surgery in a place that is not quite as busy.
Are you talking about a centralized waiting list within a province or across provinces?
Anywhere, thank you. Yeah. We don't have it in Ontario, we don't have it across, we don't even measure how many nurses are working in hospitals across the country. We don't do the basic data sharing that we need to do.
I wish the health ministers were sitting in this room right now. I think we'd have to lock the doors, actually. But they aren't, but they are listening.
I mean, it's not so much about private and public, it's about sitting there and thinking in 10 years' time, when I will be 10 years older and presumably disintegrate a little bit, will there be a health system? To a point, I don't really care who delivers it.
Armin, Max, Lynn, Dr. Turmantang, Sarah, thank you very, very much. We appreciate your time, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a big consuming conversation for the whole country. So tomorrow morning, you can hear a special edition of The Current from Victoria, BC. Matt Galloway will host a public forum on the crisis in primary health care and some more possible solutions. That's at 8:37 a.m., 9:07 in Newfoundland on CBC Radio. Just ahead on tonight's program, why a victim of domestic violence is telling CBC News her story.
Now I'm running scared. I don't stay any place. I keep moving now.
Why she believes an ankle monitor will keep her safe. Plus,
just listen to this.
What a sound. The Saskatchewan hockey rink that feels as old as the game. We'll show you why it's become an internet sensation. A survivor of domestic violence is speaking out about what she says is a gap in the safety system. Her estranged husband wasn't electronically monitored because he wasn't yet convicted. As Julia Wong shows us, some say that makes victims more vulnerable.
Jill Thompson's injuries are obvious.
I was on the ground and he was just hitting me continuously on my head.
A violent assault is etched on Thompson's face and her arms. A month earlier, Thompson's house burned down. The husband she's leaving is charged with both crimes.
Now I'm running scared. I don't stay any place. I keep moving now.
A feeling of unease. Her estranged husband, released from custody both times, was supposed to stay away from her. Thompson had little confidence in that.
And I've said it to so many people. It's a piece of paper. He knows it's a piece of paper.
She received an emergency protection order, but says more measures could make her feel safer. Some provinces can electronically track those accused in domestic violence cases. Some, like Alberta, can do so after conviction. Others do not monitor at all. Quebec is the only province in the country where both accused and victim can be monitored, and the victim is alerted if the accused gets too close. A former RCMP superintendent says that makes a difference.
I think it's a positive step forward and in dealing with those high-risk situations that we see in terms of, once again, making the victim feel safe, mitigating the potential for harm to that victim.
In Ottawa, a Quebec Conservative senator wants to see the rest of the country follow his province's lead.
I'm also surprised why just Quebec go ahead with his own bill and other provinces don't move.
This is one of our family units.
This Alberta women's shelter opened 2 years ago and is almost always at capacity. Many here fear being found.
People die, right? Like, people are murdered because of domestic violence. So if this does protect people from losing their life, I think it's a really important step.
Proximity zone is our highest alert category.
This Alberta company designs monitoring devices. Owner Vince Morelli testified at last year's triple homicide inquest in Ontario's Renfrew County. He's frustrated with a mishmash of monitoring programs.
You know, it's just maddening. We need to utilize the technology. The police want the technology. The women's shelters want the technology.
While tracking is a useful tool, some advocates say it does not get to the root of the problem.
Prevention and early intervention really are the key to breaking the cycle of domestic violence.
Jill Thompson's physical scars are healing. She says more monitoring would have given her peace of mind.
And it would just bring the sense of safety and security to the people who, the victim who doesn't know what to expect next.
For now, at least, she does. Her estranged husband is behind bars. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
For a sense of the magnitude of the problem, the latest numbers from Stats Canada show that in 2021, there were 788 homicide victims in Canada. More than 10% of them were killed by an intimate partner. Change of pace when we come back. We'll visit the Saskatchewan skating rink that is full of character.
We're going to keep her going as long as we can.
Where ice time involves a stairway to heaven. That's if heaven is in the basement. Plus, Harry Styles' most famous fan. How an Ontario great-grandmother stole the show at last night's Grammys. One of the oldest hockey rinks in Saskatchewan is getting a much-needed assist. As Sam Sampson shows us, fans are rallying around the rink after a video of some very rickety equipment went viral.
If it ain't broke,
Okay, we're down.
don't fix it.
We're going to keep her going as long as we can.
These stairs and this rink are from 1928. The stairs give players a direct path from the upstairs locker rooms to the ice. Locals have gone up and down for years, but sometimes visiting rec teams stumble. This is the safe way to use this 95-year-old drawbridge. You're going to release the rope, take your step onto the bridge, and use your own weight to bring it down slowly, steadily, and safely. And then, once it's on the ice, you're ready to play a game in one of the oldest rinks in Saskatchewan.
It was interesting because I thought I was going to slip, but I didn't.
I went, okay, we're coming down with an entrance. It's just something I've never ever seen. It's pretty cool.
Beyond the stairs, even more character.
Just listen to this.
The ice is natural, aka if it's cold outside, it'll be freezing inside. There aren't many seats, so most people stand to watch the games.
Looking good.
And prepping the ice takes work. Shoveling, tossing snow outside. Smoothing it out with an old school Zamboni. After years of dwindling small towns, the rink only sees about 6 games a year, but the community says kids skate here every day. The rink board used to rely on fundraising suppers to pay for maintenance costs, but it's been tough since COVID.
Luckily, we have a good handful of people that help out and do the volunteer hours for free. Usually when the rink board calls, more volunteers show up.
That video went viral, prompting the rink board to create an online fundraiser. The goal is to keep the rink alive.
Coming down these steps and seeing this building full and just rocking. It was our Stanley Cup we were playing for.
Because the memories here matter. Sam Sampson, CBC News, Lang, Saskatchewan.
In just days, that fundraiser has topped maybe $20,000. The money will pay for, among other things, some grease for the ladder's pulley. So that woman right there is Rina La Fantasie. After announcing Album of the Year at last night's Grammy Awards, she got wrapped in a bear hug by the winner, Harry Styles. So she is a great-grandmother from Sudbury, Ontario, who just happens to be a mega fan of Harry Styles. Last night, she had the experience of a lifetime. Tonight, she tells us how it all happened in our moment.
The Grammys did their job. He's getting that award.
When she was giving her big speech over the holidays to our entire family about why Harry Styles is the best, I was sitting there with my phone and I was like, this would be hilarious on TikTok. And that's how producers found us, I guess.
And the Grammy goes to...
He turns around, he comes over with the envelope. I did not have my glasses on.
You can read it.
So I'm thinking really fast. I'm saying, oh my God, like he gives me the envelope. I got to read this. And I wanted to make sure not to read out the wrong name, although in my heart, it had to be Harry. Harry Styles! But he was just holding me and he was so warm and I looked in his eyes and he was like I said, you so deserve this, Harry. Enjoy it. You so deserve this.
I love her. So she says that she was really shocked at how heavy that trophy was. She didn't want to drop it before she gave it to Harry. And when asked, what is it about Harry Styles? She said, you know, he's really good looking. That is a national for Monday, February the 6th. Have a good night.